Was I wrong for exposing my ex-fiancé's affair partner 12 years later and ruining her marriage? 12 years ago, my life felt like it was falling into place. I was 24, deeply in love, and engaged to Mark, fake name, who I thought was my soulmate. We were planning our wedding, and everything seemed perfect. Then, my world turned upside down. I discovered Mark was having an affair with a much younger coworker, Margaret, 20s F. To make matters worse, she was also in a committed relationship at the time.
The betrayal shattered me.
I ended the engagement immediately and, after much deliberation, informed Margaret's boyfriend about her infidelity. It was an incredibly painful chapter in my life. Moving on was anything but easy, but with months of therapy and the unwavering support of my friends and family, I eventually healed. Now, at 36, I'm happily married to Thomas, 41M, the most wonderful man I could ever imagine. He's not only my husband, but also an amazing father to our 4 children, a 9-year-old daughter, a 7-year-old son, and our 4-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. Life took me far away from those painful memories. I relocated to the other side of the country and hadn't thought about Mark or the affair in years. Then last year, something unexpected happened. Thomas works at a law firm, and they brought on a new lawyer, Nick, 34M. Nick had just moved to our area with his wife and 2 young kids, a 4-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter. Nick and Thomas hit it off quickly, bonding over shared interests and similar personalities. Naturally, Thomas suggested inviting Nick and his family over for a playdate to help them settle into their new surroundings. I agreed, happy to support my husband's new friendship. When Nick arrived at our house with his family, everything seemed normal until I saw his wife, Margaret. I recognized her instantly, and by the way her face froze, I could tell she recognized me too. It was like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Neither of us acknowledged our shared past, but the tension between us was palpable. Thomas and Nick noticed something was off, but they couldn't figure out why. Margaret and I made awkward attempts at small talk, but it was clear we were both uncomfortable. After about an hour, Margaret made an excuse to leave early, and they were gone. Later that evening, Thomas asked me what was going on. He knew me well enough to see I was troubled, so I told him everything. He already knew about my engagement to Mark and the betrayal that ended it, but this was the first time Margaret's name came up in our conversations. Thomas was shocked but supportive as always. Not long after, I received a text message from Margaret. She begged me not to tell Nick about our history. I read the message, but didn't respond. I decided I didn't want to get involved. It wasn't my problem anymore. A week passed, and then Nick showed up at our house unexpectedly. He was clearly agitated and wanted to speak to Thomas privately. After their conversation, Thomas came to me and explained what was going on. Nick had been pressing Margaret all week about what had happened at our meeting. She refused to give him a straight answer and eventually tried to spin a story that I was her ex-boyfriend's mistress, and the tension was because of some imagined rivalry.
Nick didn't buy it.
Desperate for the truth, he turned to me. I could see how much the uncertainty was weighing on him, so I decided to tell him everything. I shared the full story of what happened between Mark, Margaret, and me all those years ago. I even showed him the text Margaret had sent, pleading for my silence. I didn't sugarcoat anything. There was no point, especially after Margaret had tried to smear my name. Nick was devastated. He explained that infidelity is a huge trigger for him. His father had cheated on his mother for years before finally leaving their family for another woman, a betrayal that left deep scars. Margaret knew this about him from the very beginning of their relationship. Nick left our house looking completely defeated. Later that evening, I received a call from Margaret. She was furious, calling me a vindictive B********H and accusing me of trying to ruin her life. Since then, I've received a handful of messages and calls from people close to Margaret, criticizing me for exposing her past to Nick. They've called me petty and cruel, saying I should have kept quiet. This all happened last year, and I've tried to put it behind me, but those comments linger. I still don't believe I did anything wrong. I told the truth when asked. I didn't seek out Nick to stir up trouble, and I certainly didn't lie. But sometimes I wonder, did I go too far by being honest? Am I the asshole for telling Nick the truth? I originally shared my story on the Ada subreddit about a year ago. Since then, many people have asked for updates, so I decided to post everything that's happened since then here on my page. First, some clarifications. This story is real. The only thing I've changed are the names for privacy reasons. I'm also not AI. This is my personal account of what happened. I don't believe cheaters should be punished forever. While I wouldn't want to be close friends with Margaret, after the initial shock wore off, I didn't feel the need to hold a grudge. I can be civil with her. That said, I don't think Margaret should live in misery for what she did years ago. However, I also don't think she was blameless in the affair. Mark, my ex-fiancé, was the one who betrayed me directly. He was the one engaged to me. But Margaret was fully aware of my existence. We worked at the same company, and it was no secret that Mark and I were living together and planning a wedding. How Margaret got my number? To clarify a common question, Margaret got my number from Nick's phone. My last name is uncommon, and my first name isn't very popular either. Nick had my number because we had exchanged texts about organizing the kids' playdate. Henry had given me Nick's contact information so I could reach out, and Nick responded when I texted him. That was the extent of it. At the time, Henry barely knew Margaret. He had only seen her once when visiting the office with Nick. The fact that Margaret had access to her husband's phone didn't seem strange to me, but her decision to use that access to contact me was unsettling. Margaret and Nick are still married, but things haven't been smooth for them. After Nick left my house that day, he stayed in a hotel for a while. Eventually, he returned home, and they started couples therapy to work on their relationship. For over a month after the incident, I dealt with harassment in the form of calls and texts from Margaret and a few people close to her. It got so bad that Henry was preparing to send a cease and desist letter. Before he could follow through, he decided to talk to Nick about the situation. Nick handled it immediately. According to what Henry heard from Nick, most of the people harassing me didn't know the full story. Once Nick clarified the situation, the harassment stopped. Months later, Margaret emailed me to apologize. While I accepted her apology, it didn't feel entirely sincere. I got the impression she was more focused on trying to save her marriage than truly making amends with me. Regardless, I have no interest in being close to her. At a party at my house several months after the incident, Nick and I had a private conversation. I told him I felt awful for the role I played in their marital problems, but he reassured me that I wasn't to blame. Nick confided that their marriage had already been strained before Margaret and I crossed paths again. He explained that Margaret had been unhappy about moving to our state, far from her family. Their finances had also been a source of conflict. In their previous state, the cost of living was much higher, and Margaret had stopped working after their second child was born. Adjusting to a reduced lifestyle created tension between them. The move to our state had been a practical decision for Nick's career. It offered a better position and a significant pay raise, but it hadn't resolved their deeper issues. Recently, things took another downer. Henry told me that Nick has been struggling with depression after a particularly heated argument with Margaret about their Thanksgiving plans. Margaret wanted to travel back to their old state to spend the holiday with her family, while Nick wanted to visit his mother, who lives closer. Their disagreement escalated, and Nick ended up staying at a co-worker's house for a few days to cool off. Nick later confided to Henry that he's planning to start divorce proceedings. During their last fight, Margaret had mentioned taking the kids and moving back near her parents. Nick made it clear that he wouldn't let her have full custody of their children. That's all I know for now. I'm not sure if Nick will go through with a divorce, but the tension in their relationship seems to be reaching a breaking point. As for me, I've distanced myself from the situation as much as possible. I've done my part, and I have no intention of getting further involved. Now on to the next story, story 2. AITA for leaving my husband after discovering the real reason he never had kids? I'm Anna, a 27-year-old woman, and I've been married to my husband, James, a 39-year-old man, for 2 years now. I know what you're probably thinking. Yes, there's a significant age gap between us. We met when I was 24 and working as a consultant for the law firm where James worked. At the time, I was pursuing my doctorate in criminal psychology, which I started at 20. Around that time, a family friend, who's also a lawyer, reached out to me for help on a case. I was excited to gain hands-on experience in my field and jumped at the opportunity to assist. James was one of the lawyers on the case, but I was so focused on proving myself that I didn't take the time to really get to know him on a personal level. I wanted to make a good impression, and my attention was fully on the work. About 4 months into the project, my 24th birthday came around. I hadn't made many friends in the area since I was new, but my lawyer friend offered to take me out to a bar to celebrate. I accepted her kind offer, and she invited a mix of her friends and mine. As it turns out, James was one of the people she invited. That night, James bought me a drink, and we ended up striking up a conversation. We hit it off almost instantly. It was like we'd known each other for years. We had so much in common and shared similar values and goals. But then, during the celebration, everyone sang happy birthday for me. That's when James realized how young I was. He immediately apologized for flirting with me, saying he didn't mean to come across as inappropriate, given the age difference. I assured him that I wasn't bothered at all and, in fact, had been enjoying our conversation. I told him I was interested in getting to know him better, and we exchanged numbers. Not long after that, we started dating. During one of our earlier dates, the topic of why he was still single came up. James explained that he had been married before, but the relationship ended because his ex-wife didn't want children. He told me that having kids was always a non-negotiable for him, and he had ended other relationships for the same reason. If someone didn't want a family, he didn't see the point in continuing. I respected his honesty and understood his perspective completely. I've always wanted children too, and I admired his clarity about what he wanted in life. It made me feel like we were on the same page about such an important issue. As we continued to date, it became clear to me that James was deeply committed to the idea of family. I found that very attractive. I had always envisioned myself as a younger mom, but I struggled to find a partner who shared my future-oriented mindset until James. Fast forward a few years, and we're now married. We live in a beautiful home in Washington with 2 dogs, 2 cats, and what I thought was a bright and promising future. I'm just 1 semester away from earning my doctorate, and I felt like life couldn't be more perfect. That was until a few days ago, when a conversation with James completely shifted my perspective. We were discussing the recent 2024 election. We both voted blue, and the topic shifted to the issue of abortion rights. James made a comment about why he supported government intervention, saying, "That's why I voted yes, because I would have been a father already multiple times if not for abortion." When he emphasized the word multiple, I froze. I had no idea he'd been in that situation before, let alone multiple times. I asked him to explain, and he revealed that, over the course of his life, 5 different women had terminated pregnancies while they were with him. Once when he was 19, twice in his 20s, and twice in his 30s, including his ex-wife. I was stunned. 5 times? How had this never come up in our 3 years together? Not even when we discussed why his marriage ended? He said those experiences had deeply shaped his views on women, trust, and parenthood. This revelation left me reeling. If 5 different women, across various stages of his life, decided not to have his child, what does that say about him as a person? Up until now, James has been nothing but a kind, loving, and supportive partner. He's never given me any reason to doubt his ability to be a great father. But this new information made me question if I'd overlooked something important about his character. What disturbed me even more was his reasoning for supporting government control over women's reproductive rights. He justified it by saying he felt cheated out of fatherhood. I don't know why those women made their decisions, but it felt wrong for James to take his personal experiences and use them to justify restricting the rights of millions of women. This entire situation has made me question whether James has been treating me so well because he genuinely loves me or because he sees me as the key to fulfilling his dream of having children. Was I just a convenient option for him to finally become a father? Would he have treated any woman this way as long as she seemed like a viable candidate for motherhood? I feel completely blindsided. My mom suggested I sit down with James and get more clarity before making any major decisions, but I can't shake the feeling that I've been misled. It's hard to reconcile this version of James with the man I thought I knew. For now, I'm staying with my lawyer friend, the same one who introduced us years ago. She suggested that I reach out to his ex-wife to see if she'd be willing to share her perspective on their marriage and why it ended. ITA for doing that?